Hey guys, it's Tamara coming back at you with another video. Welcome back to my channel. I figured I would post a third video on suicide, and one of the reasons why is because I have had a client come in, and her question to me was, what do you do what do you do when your family is part of the reason for why you decide to consider suicide? And that question kind of haunted me. And so I figured for us today that we would focus on the family dynamic and some typical behaviors of the family dynamic that can push someone to want to consider suicide, you know, as a way out, as a way to escape the torment of their mind. So I figured today we would talk a little bit about that, and I want to focus on 4 domains. And within the, I believe it's the 3rd domain, I'm going to highlight some individual aspects within that domain, and you'll see as we go along. And I'm going to make sure to post things all around me here so that you can kind of keep up with me and be able to understand where I'm coming from. So the benefits for you in this video today is that you will be able to conceptualize family dynamics as it relates to suicide, and how certain family dynamics can push someone to consider suicide. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that tends to happen with an individual who may be depressed or anxious or searching for meaning and purpose, or just trying to figure things out. So one of the things that I've noticed about individuals who are not satisfied with life, they want to know what this is all about, is that they, throughout their life, they're in constant search of meaning. They're constantly searching for some way to make sense out of their existence. And when they don't find that easy answer, they start to slide down the slope of depression, because they can't conceptualize why there is no answer to their biggest hurts and their pain and their questions and their perplexities. So they end up, you know, depressed and anxious, and then suicide seems to be one part of the equation that would end all their pain. So throughout the lifespan of someone who struggles with purpose and meaning and getting answers to why things happen, I've noticed that with these kind of clients, they tend to struggle with intrusive experiences. Okay, and what I mean by intrusive experiences is that, you know, throughout their life, they get these intrusive, involuntary experiences or thought patterns or behaviors that completely throws them off. So an example of an intrusive experience might be, let's say you've been paying mortgage on your home for the past 10 years. Now you've lost your job. Now your neighbors are coming against you. You want to move, but you can't move because you can't afford a mortgage and rent. The intrusive experience is the simple fact that you've lost your job, and now you're being put in a situation where you're uncomfortable, right? There's no wiggle room, right? You can't manage a mortgage and rent at the same time. You can't manage mortgage and rent and have, right? You can't try to make sense out of things unless you're getting sleep or unless you're feeling positive in your mood. So an intrusive experience, the way that I define it, is it's an experience that puts you in an uncomfortable reality, right? It's intrusive, it's involuntary, it's unwanted. Individuals who struggle with suicidal thoughts or difficulty finding meaning in their life experiences intrusive experiences. Now, this can also happen within a family context. Let's say that the intrusive experience is the reunion with your substance abusing mother, right? you realize that, you know, because dad has died and your mother has no family members, you're going to have to be the family member who's going to step up and be support for your substance abusing mother. The intrusive situation there is that, number one, you don't want to be a part of that because you haven't spoken to your mother in decades. Two, you don't want to have to be her caretaker because she never really cared for you in the first place. And three, she's a substance abuser. So you're going to have to deal with a lot of things you don't want to deal with. That's an intrusive situation. Something that's unwarranted, unwanted, involuntary, and it's putting a lot of pressure on you. So that's an example also of a family dynamic that creates or sets the stage for an intrusive experience. Okay, I had an intrusive experience some years ago when my family seemed to be, I think I was about 12 or 13, my family seemed to be going one way, and then all of a sudden, you know, my brother and his girlfriend are expecting a baby, and then now they want to get married, now he's moving out of the house, I'm going off to college in the next 6 years. Like, it was too much happening all at once, and these were things that were intrusive, they were unwanted, they were involuntary, I didn't expect them, right? And we had such a complicated family dynamic because of just families, right? We don't all get along, or we don't all see things the same, right? The experience was very intrusive for me. Thankfully, I didn't experience any suicidal thoughts, but there are some people who do because it's just too much coming at them all at once. Okay, so the first is intrusive experiences. The second one is relationship experiences that are traumatic, challenging, and difficult, right? So, individuals who have a complicated family dynamic where nobody gets along, or you don't see things the same, or that family member that you communicate with most is unsupportive, or, you know, let's say it's your mother or your dad, they don't really seem to care about you or your well-being, okay? That kind of a situation can often push you into having thoughts of suicide, right? Because the family dynamic is so intermixed with personalities and behaviors and ill manners and, you know, lack of stability, that you begin to lose hope and you say, you know what, forget this. Okay, so that's two. The third one is avoidance, right? Individuals who are struggling with suicidal thoughts sometimes avoid, and they avoid because they don't want to go back to feeling suicidal or depressed. So they avoid. It's easier, right? So I want to give you some specific examples, and I'm going to list them over here, of what avoidance for these kind of individuals look like. And I'm going to give you an example of a client that I had some years ago. I was about maybe 2 years out of grad school, about 10 years ago, and I worked in a rehabilitation center for individuals who had severe illnesses like bipolar and schizophrenia and post-traumatic stress disorder. And I remember working with a 40-year-old man who was attractive and smart and engaging and loving, but he also had these bouts with psychosis. He also had these bouts with mania. He couldn't sleep, very poor hygiene, poor eating habits, relationships with family were very unstable. Instead of facing the fact that he was chronically suicidal, that he thought about suicide 24/7, he just didn't have the energy or the courage to do it. That's what he told me one session. I don't have the energy or the courage to kill myself. But this individual was chronically suicidal, and instead of working on that, he avoided every single session. It was avoidance, whether he realized it or not. Okay, and so there were a few things that he did, and I want to point this out just in case you have a loved one that's going through this, or just in case you yourself are experiencing this. Okay, so the first type of avoidance that he utilized with me, he utilized every last one of these that I'm going to give you until I got to a point of saying, have anything else for me, because I can handle that too. We need to get down to business, right? So the first was compensation. right? He compensated by acting overly intelligent, by acting as if he understood and knew things that he did not. He compensated for being ill, for having chronic suicidal thoughts, for coming from a very difficult family. He compensated by kind of flaunting his intelligence and flaunting what he knew. But then he also compensated by acting as if he didn't have any questions, or acting as if he understood where I was at all times. And there were times that I would, honestly try to lose him, just to show him that you don't have me figured out like you think you do. And so he was kind of a game player, because he realized that if he didn't compensate, the reality of the situation would be too painful for him. Right? So therapy sessions were like a matching of the wits to start out, until my supervisor was like, Tamara, do you know what's happening here? But for him, compensation was avoidance, okay? The next one is reaction formation, and that was a term that Sigmund Freud came up with. I'm not a fan of Sigmund Freud by any stretch, but I do like his view of reaction formation. And what that is it's the view that you are exhibiting or displaying an opposite emotion to what you really feel. So you really feel fear, but you're flaunting courage, right? With this client, he would flaunt courage, he would flaunt education, he would flaunt his money because he came from a very rich family. But his real emotions were insecurity and fear, right? The best way to think of reaction formation in this particular case is narcissism, right? It's this scared, inadequate, emotionally unstable child putting on a brave face for the world. That's basically what he would do to avoid, okay? The next one is transference, and his transference with me was eroticized. And what I mean by that is that every session, in order to avoid paying attention to what he was supposed to be paying attention to, he literally would fantasize about me in the session. And that resulted in me feeling uncomfortable. That resulted in me, really putting up boundaries and protecting my space and my business and my time and my energy. But his fantasies of me and the confession of how he felt for me was a distraction. And it took maybe a couple of months before he could admit what he was feeling. I knew it from the start, but it took him a while before he could say, okay, you're right, you got me. So his eroticized transference was avoidance. He did not want to focus on what he should have been focusing on in the moment. It's easier to focus on me and him and a fantasy getting married than it is to focus on the fact that he was delusional and psychotic at times and, couldn't take care of himself. That's why he was in a rehabilitation center. The next one is triangulation. So he would try to pull me and two other people into a triangle and spin it, right? It's like he would pull me, another staff, and another patient in the facility and try to get something going and started, because that was his defense. It kept everybody out there and away from him so that he didn't have to explore what's going on inside. The next one is a poor listener, right? There were many sessions where I would answer his questions or help him process something, and I felt like it was falling on deaf ears. He would rather talk the whole session than listen, right? Because he doesn't have to explore or think or feel if he's always talking. The next one is a condescending attitude. There were many sessions where he would come in and he would sit a certain way on the couch and he would have this attitude that said, you're not teaching me anything new. I've been there, done that, what you're just starting to learn to do. And it was very condescending because that was his way of keeping me at a distance. The last one is displacement and fantasy, right? He would displace his true emotions onto me. So when he was angry, it was me that caught it. When he was sad, it was because of something I said. If he was happy, it was because of something I did, right? And then he would fantasize. And then the fantasy would go back into the eroticized transference. So it was like this cycle. Okay, so there are many ways that a person who is struggling with reality can avoid. And these are just a couple of ways that they avoid. I mean, there's millions of others that I could go over, and I might do that at some point on this channel. But I did want to throw out there that people who are struggling with life, struggling with suicidal thoughts, struggling with depression, struggling with a complicated family dynamic, and feeling suicidal as a result, may avoid reality using any of these things. Okay? The last one that I want to point out is an overwhelming sense of confusion and lack of direction. Some people who are dealing with suicidal thoughts struggle with the simple fact that they can't make sense out of life. They can't make sense out of their life, out of their identity, out of where they want to be and where to go, right? One conversation I had with my clients was about Anthony Bourdain. And as more reports come out, it's becoming more clear to everyone that he struggled behind closed doors with chronic suicidal thoughts, with feelings of inadequacy, with feelings of not really knowing where he wanted to be, even though to us he appeared fine. But for a lot of people like him, who seem to be sensitive to life and sensitive to people and things, it's hard to manage those emotions. And so unfortunately, some people commit suicide as opposed to reaching out for help. So guys, thank you so much for being with me today. If you have questions about this video, or I lost you, or you felt a little bit confused, I encourage you to post your comments in the comment section below. I also encourage you to contact me at my website, anchoredinKnowledge.com, or on my blog. If you have questions about this, I'm going to be posting an article on Wednesday about suicidal thoughts. So stay tuned for that on my blog at psychcentral.com. I will post the links in the description box below, just so you'll have those links in hand. I encourage you to give this video a thumbs up if it was helpful to you, and to hit the subscribe button on the side here so that you can continue to get videos when they come out. All right, guys, so I will post everything at the end of the video, but in the meantime, I wish you well, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.